So my title today is who do you trust? And I won't go through this story, but for those of us that remember Johnny Carson before he did the Tonight Show, he had a show titled Who Do You Trust? And I'll tell you, I won't do it here, I'll tell you a funny story later. Somebody I know was on that show, and Carson really pulled a funny line on him. So I did want to mention too, after the service today's the fourth Sunday, they have tables set aside for us if we want to have lunch or just go and be with one another. So please use those tables. And the reason they've got tablecloths on today is they're celebrating Reverend Valerie's year as the minister of unity. Okay. So anyway, it's I wanted to speak about trust. So it's really easy to live in trust when things in your life are, at least it is for me, when things are going really well, it's easy to trust, right? I mean, there's no reason not to. It's when times get difficult that it's a little more difficult to trust. And in my own life, one of the more difficult prayers for me is to say, "Thy will be done," because that means letting go. And if I'm having a tough time in my life, I usually have some ideas on how to fix it that I'd like to send up to God in case he needs, a little help. But letting go and letting God is a lot easier said than done. At least it is for me. But that's really what we need to learn how to do if we're going to live a life that's serene and that's peaceful. Because as I allow myself to get in touch with the real me, and that's the me beyond the ego, beyond doubt, beyond fear, as I let myself get beyond all of that, I find no matter what's going on in my life, that God still loves me. And so how could I not trust myself? It's that loving presence that's within us that knows how to create oceans, trees, mountains, and that same presence is right here with each and every one of us to help us get through whatever life is showing us. I may experience things that are difficult, but if I can keep my trust, I find and I wind up realizing that right within is the best friend that I could ever hope to have. And Jenna just read something from Ernest Holmes, a quote from him. He said, "The real self is God, and as such is to be implicitly trusted." And he's not saying that we're all of God, but he's saying God is all of us. And so we've got that divine presence within us, and we need to trust that. So Alan Cohen, in his book Dare to Be Yourself, he talks about Jimmy Durante, and I guess this is going to age some of us, but if you remember when Jimmy Durante had his variety show on TV, he ended every show the same way. There'd be a spotlight, and he'd step into the spotlight and he'd sing a song. And after the first verse, the spotlight would go out and another spotlight would light up, and he'd step into that spotlight, sing another verse, and it would happen again 2 or 3 or 4 times. He'd sing a verse, the spotlight would go out, and he'd do it again and again. And Alan Cohen said, that's just like the spiritual path, the way Jimmy Durante closed his show. Because there are times when we feel like we're in the dark and we're not sure what direction to take. And then the moment we need it, the path seems to be illumined. We find our way one step at a time, and we receive what we need when we need it, and when we honor that deepest voice that speaks through us, the next step becomes known to us. So we say, you know, we can have difficult times in our life, but when we go within and do the work, a way gets lit for us to go, just like it was lit for Jimmy Durante at the end of his show. And you know, I was reading something this week about Joe Montana, who used to be the football quarterback for the 49ers. And he was saying in this article that the scariest times in his life wasn't when he was on the football field having these big guys run and try to crush him. He said, the scariest moment in my life, he had a date with his girlfriend who he absolutely loved. And they were going out with a couple of other couples for dinner on the wharf in San Francisco. And when they get to the restaurant, he said to his girlfriend, let them go in. How about you and I take a walk down by the water? And she had no idea why he wanted her to walk down by the water with him. But what she didn't know was he had hired a friend to fly by in an airplane with a banner that said, Jen, will you marry me? And he said that was the scariest moment, waiting for the plane and waiting to see if she was going to say yes. And you know, the point of it is that you know, I want to make, and that he was trying to make, is that we must, in life, we must be willing to be vulnerable. We need to move into uncharted waters with no promised result, not knowing what it is, to be willing to step out of our comfort zone and trust that the universe is going to take care of us, knowing we're safe because we're one in God, because we have that divine presence in us. And I've talked about Oriah Mountain Dreamer before. You know, she's written, I forgot the name of the two books, but she's written two really great books. And in one of her books, she said that there are times in her life when she feels there's no hope. And she said, when I feel there's no hope, I still have faith. And she gave a couple of examples. She said, you know, when I'm sick, sometimes I feel there's really no hope that I'm going to get better. And she has a son who, when she wrote the book, wasn't doing very well in school. And she said, sometimes I have no hope that he's gonna do better in school. And she said, I really would like to meet somebody. And there are times I have no hope that I'm ever gonna find my life's partner again. And she said, even in those times when all hope is gone, she feels a faith that sustains her. A faith, she said, that she can find in life the good, the funny, the sweet, and the tender. That she has a faith that even though times might be really tough, that those things are still there. A faith that says to her, life is going to be okay. That life is going to continue and will pull her back up. She said it's like it's living with the anticipation of what will be, knowing that life in all its fullness is still good. So I saw something this week about a priest that every day he visits a convent. And one of the things that the nuns in this convent do is they feed children. But they're going broke. And the nuns are kind of in despair. And one day when he goes, one of the nuns goes over to the priest and she says, this is the last coin that we have. And he says to her, may I see it? And she gives it to him, and he takes the coin and he throws it out a window, and he says to her, now rely entirely on God. I'm sure she was ready to kill him. But he said to her, now rely entirely on God. And they prayed together, and what happens, people come with food, and people come with money. And the moral of the story is, whenever we're feeling short, to remember that God is the source of our supply. God is the source of our supply. And when I read it, it made me laugh, because years ago, I had my own business, and it was a search business. Companies would pay me to find people to work in the company. And I specialized in doing human resource people, and I did really well. But the timing of doing this, so if a company would give me a search, what I would have to do then is go find candidates. And then you present the candidates to the company, and they interview the people, and hopefully they like somebody or some somebodies, and they go back again for interviews, and then they make somebody an offer, and usually that person has to give notice, and then they start their job, and it could be another month before the accounts payable company pays me. So it could be from the time I would get a search to the time I would actually get paid could be a fair amount of time. And there would be times when, and especially in a one-man shop, you're doing work or you're marketing, it's hard to do both. And there would be times when I wouldn't have anything in the pipeline, and I would start to get really nervous that, oh my God, what happens when I fill these? Where am I gonna go? And I would always go, of course, to my practitioner here, and she would say to me the same thing that we just heard, and she would say to me, you're forgetting your clients aren't your source of supply, and your candidates aren't your source of supply. God is your source of supply. Pray and let's see what happens. And it always worked. It always worked, just like when the priest threw the coin out the window. We have to just remember that spirit is our source, not down here, not one another. And so, one of the questions, I actually was going to do this as a throw-out question, but since we did that last week, I figured I won't do it again. But one of the questions we could ask ourselves is, what would you do if you weren't afraid? What would you do if you weren't afraid? So I read a blog this week by a lady named Amy Johnson. And she was writing about fear. And she said, control, because she was writing about control, I'm sorry, she said, control is rooted in fear. It's being attached to a specific outcome, one we're sure is the best. And she said, like you and I always know what's the best outcome, right? And she said, so when we trust that things will be okay no matter what comes our way, we don't need to micromanage the universe. We don't need to do that. And she said, if we just let go and open up and surrender, many more possibilities come to us. So it made me think about that. Just think, if we have an idea of what the only good outcome is going to be, and that's what we want, and that's what we push, we only see one possible outcome. But if we let go and we trust that the universe is on our side, Einstein said the single most important question we could ever ask is the universe a friendly place? If we believe that, then we go beyond our one idea and we see all kinds of other possibilities that open up that aren't there when we're attached to one idea. To surrender is to stop fighting with ourselves and stop fighting with the universe. It means being comfortable with not knowing. And we talked about this at the book group a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned that one of the things Michael Beckwith from Agape says is our eyes aren't big enough. And what he means by that is, on this plane, our eyes aren't big enough to know all the answers. And so we have to be willing to live the question sometimes and to trust that the universe is a friendly place. And when we allow God to come into our lives, that we're gonna have a good outcome. So another book I was looking at this week is by Sue Monk Kidd. And in the chapter, one of the chapters, she has a quote by somebody named Rollo May, who said, in human beings, courage is necessary to make becoming possible. In human beings, courage is necessary to make becoming possible. And what he means is it takes courage to let go. It takes courage to become who you're meant to be. And you know, in the Bible, a young man comes to Jesus and he says to him, so what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, go sell everything you have and follow me. And the guy says, not today. But what he meant when he said, go sell everything and follow me, he means stop clinging. Stop clinging to what is and be willing to go deep inside yourself. Release the external world. And you know, the word courage comes from a French word that I think is pronounced coeur, C-O-E-U-R. And what it means is heart. In order to move away from clinging, we need to take heart. And I read a quote by a rabbi this week named Naomi Levy, and she says, God has given us life, and God is here to help us return to life when we have suffered. God has given us heart, and God is here to help us feel once more. So I want to tell you a story about a spiritual fable about a spiritual leader who dies. And he had lots of followers, and he gets to the gates of heaven, and a voice says to him, who's there? Who knocks? And he says, it is I. And the voice says to him, sorry, there's no room in heaven, go away. And he's stunned. So he goes away, and he takes another year or two, and he meditates, and he ponders, and he goes back and gets the same question, who goes there? And he gives the same answer, it is I. And the voice once again says, sorry, there's no room in heaven, go away. And this happens several times. And finally, he goes back, meditates, thinks about it, and goes back one last time. And the voice says, who is there? Who knocks? And he says, it is thou. And the gates open, and a voice says to him, there never was room in here for you and me. And the point is, there is not God and you and I. There is only God expressed as you and I. And the Buddhist, there's a Buddhist mantra that makes it really clear. And the mantra is, there is one life, that life is God, that life is perfect, that life is my life now. There is one life, that life is God, that life is perfect, that life is my life now. And actually, the Buddhists repeat that 108 times using mala beads. Oneness is a state of being. All of us come with gifts to give. And they can be really big, like some people, or they can be having a family, starting a business. They don't have to be big. And we know that we're on the right path when what we're doing fills us with a sense of purpose, and when we know we're serving others. And so I just want to close with an affirmation that I wrote a couple of years ago. In this stillness, I learn to accept my strength, my healing, and my renewal. I learn to trust the loving universe that unfolds in divine perfection. Thank you for being here. God bless you.